I want to welcome everybody to the Unimpressed podcast. And today we have a guy calling in, and his name is Larry Lawton, and he is a jewelry robber. He was sentenced for 4 12-year sentences, spent 11 in prison, and now he's redeemed himself and living in Florida. I want to welcome to the show. Larry, how you doing?
Pretty good, John. Thanks for having me on. I'm an open book, literally.
You know, when you're driving down this road or living down this road in New York City, you know, it's a very hard town. I lived in New Jersey for 12 and a half years and North Caldwell, New Jersey for 12 and a half years. And it wears on you a little bit and you have to survive. When you made that choice to steal jewelry, what was going through your head?
Well, you know, John, I started out, I was, associated with the Gambino crime family. My first robbery, I was in Florida at the time, and that's where my home base was. And my first robbery was actually a setup, an insurance job. What happened then was I made a lot of money, $150,000. This is in 1989, I think it was 89, and 88 or 89, and I made $150,000 my end. But I knew what happened. The owner wanted the insurance money. So he didn't know when I was going to do it, how I was going to do it, but I knew where the jewelry was going to be, how many employees were going to be in there, the kind of schedule of things. So it was a setup. But after that, I went wild. I robbed over 20 jewelry stores, 22, between 15 and 18 million. And, obviously, you can eventually get caught. Everybody does. And I ended up doing the 12 years. And my first prison was actually Atlanta, USP Atlanta, which was the worst prison in the country at the time. We had a murder a month for 18 months when I was in there. And that's not counting overdoses. That's not counting suicides, supposable suicides. And, but you survive. When you're a survivor, you survive.
Now, were you fencing this jewelry for the mob, or what was up with that?
No, I mean, I was fencing it, obviously, and it was going to another mob family. And I would have to take the cut and give it to my bosses in the Gambino crime family. And usually it was about 10%. I mean, like, that was the number I chose. And they didn't say how much, but if I made 400,000, I'm giving an envelope for 40,000. And that goes up the chain, and I was left alone. People ask you, why did you have to do that? Well, if you're in New York City and if you get rid of stuff, every other family there will find out what you're doing, and they're going to take you hostage, and they're going to get their money. And you don't need that. So, but you have the protection and the blessings of a family that you could be associated with. You're an earner, is what it's called. And I was an earner. And this is, I'm not a kid anymore, John. I'm 62. So, I just look young. It's just the way it was. Back then, it was really, really strong. The mob was very strong. South Florida, when I moved to South Florida, it really was big. I mean, obviously, there was drug trade going on. This is the late 80s, early 90s. It was all drug money. Miami was all drug money. My whole Miami is built on drug money. So there was a lot of crime down here, a lot of wise guys, a lot of, just straight hustles, I used to call them. Not, it wasn't a place you're going to go like Connecticut or something like that and just live your life. Jersey's like that. Jersey had a lot of that stuff going on back then too.
Yeah. Jersey's a little different than New York. I mean, it's the same, but it's not, If you know somebody in Jersey, things can get done. You know what I mean?
I know many people in Jersey, and right. It's a different animal. New York is just so off the hook, and it's very territorial. When you ran in an area, you were with a certain family, you didn't go into other areas, especially for crime or anything like that. That was unheard of. That's why I never robbed a jewelry store ever. And I robbed all over the East Coast. I was the biggest jewel robber in the United States and on the East Coast. And I was on America's Most Wanted. I was on all these shows. And if you look, I never robbed anywhere. The closest I ever robbed was Connecticut, Maryland, and Georgia.
You were going Jersey?
Nope, not Jersey and New York was two places I was told to stay at. So, for reasons of they're protected.
Yeah.
Jersey, South Jersey had the Philly mob protecting them, and that was the Nicky Scarfo. It was a little after Nicky. It was John Stanford after that. And but you didn't cause a war.
When you were in the city, who was running the show? Who was running the mob then?
Well, our family, that's Castellano got killed in 85. Mm-hmm. So then John Gotti took over. Then John Gotti went to prison in 92. too. So, but I met him and stuff, but I didn't get to, associate with him. I seen him in restaurants, and, I'm a kid. I was in my late 20s, and then you shut your mouth, you learn that early. When you grow up in the Bronx and Brooklyn in that area, you know what to do. If you don't, you're going to learn the hard way. And, I didn't do that.
Well, New York, even though it has 8 million people in the boroughs, it's not that big of a town. Once you know certain areas and certain players in town, it's not that big, surprisingly.
Totally true. You have Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island. And each one of them, each area, like Brooklyn, literally streets, like Bensonhurst area, which is us. And then you talk about Dyker Heights is over there, and that was the Columbos. So you had certain areas that you knew where people were and where they're coming from. And you didn't step on people's toes. People got killed a lot back then. And, you had to really be smart. I had to leave New York after I got married for, crime reasons. And then after I left New York, I was still associated. So they set me up at a pizzeria in South Florida. And that I turned into Hot Diamonds and everything else you want to get out of that. I remember on a Friday, people would come in for a pizza and say, "Get out of here." They go, "What, aren't you open?" I said, "No." I had good pizza too. Then I ended up burning it down. It's in my book, Gangster Redemption, actually, which I'm actually coming out. My book was written it's a bestseller, and it was my whole life up till 2013. Well, I just wrote 30 more pages, 2 chapters more to fill in the gap from 2013 to 2023. And we got new cover and stuff. But it's like how YouTube came about, how I became an honorary police officer, because that's not in the book. How I was recognized on the Congress. Who gets done that? And they're more criminals than me, so we know that.
When you got out of prison, when did that take place, when you got involved with law enforcement?
Well, I ended up, when I got out of prison in 2007, what am I going to do? I did have a law degree. I can't be a lawyer because I'm a felon, but I was offered jobs from law firms, as a paralegal. I'm not the kind of guy to sit down. I ended up developing, it's a great story. I started my program. A friend comes to me one day and says, "Hey, Larry, I need a favor." I said, "What the fuck? I just got out of prison. Leave me the fuck alone. Do you want to break somebody's legs?" He goes, No. He goes, "I caught my 16-year-old kid smoking weed, and he told me, 'Fuck you, Dad. Where have you ever been?'" I said, "Your son told you that?" I said, "I'll talk to your son." I happen to be blessed. I had pictures of me in prison with gangsters and murderers and stuff. And back then you were allowed to have them. I still have them. They're in my book. And I said, "I'll talk to him." The guy was a golf pro. I know him to this day. I walked to his house. He says, "Larry, my kid's in there." I told him he had to speak to you. He didn't know who I was. Nobody did. And I ended up going, I said, "You told your father where the fuck he's been? Let me show you where the fuck I just got." That's the only cursing I did, John. That's it. Then I sat down and proceeded to show him pictures of people who are dead, people who are never getting out, what they lose. And it's really not about money. It's about family. It's about your kids or whatever it's going to be. And you watch the kid. I was with him about an hour and a half, and you could literally see his brain turning. So I leave, and I said to the guy, he says, "Hey," he goes, "Man, thanks, I appreciate that." He goes, he wasn't even there. I went out to his gazebo, and he says, "I appreciate that." He gives me $100. Shit, I didn't know money. $100 is $100. And he goes, "Can I give your number out to people?" I go, "Yeah, I didn't mind that. I like talking to the kid." Before you know it, I'm getting calls from people, and they ask me to talk to their kid or whatever, and I end up getting into the court system with my program. My program now is called the Reality Check Program. It's the #1 program in the country to help young people stay out of prison. And that data, there was a quantitative analysis done on my program, and I didn't do it. Eastern Florida State College did it. They took the data and they did it, and I had a 90% rate of kids not going to prison, reoffending. 70% had better attitude, 43% had better school grades, and 31% had better school attendance. So the court systems ends up picking my program up, literally. To this day, if you get caught in Brevard County, Fort Lauderdale, South Florida, Texas, I think a place, they will sentence you to the Reality Check program. That means they have to take this program. Now it's all videoed. It's online. Yeah, it's online. It's easily done now. I used to actually do a live class twice a month. Then I can't do it. So now we put it on video. They have to go there. It's a court-ordered program, and it gives them a wake-up call. It's a 4-part program that I developed that nobody else have ever developed. And obviously the numbers speak for themselves. I actually testified in Congress once, and one of the congressmen said to me, he goes, "Man, you must be very proud of your numbers." I said, I am, but I'm more proud of the numbers I don't know. And they're looking at me. I go, how many people and young people watched my video and didn't get into the car with the kid with the drugs, or didn't commit the crime, or stay out late and there was a gun in the car and somebody robbed something that are all in on a range? How many kids did not do that? That number's out there. I don't know it, but I'm more proud of that number, not just the number of, what people are doing. Yes, you're proud of numbers, but what's the real number? I mean, we don't know. Nobody will know.
How do you think the younger generation today compares to when you were coming up, as far as, believing in the foundation, respect, doing the right thing, because even though people commit crimes in New York and New Jersey and the mob, to some degree, they followed the rules in certain places, in certain ways of life. Do you think that happens today?
Well, obviously, I think the young generation is more of the now generation, I call. They want to be successful now. They don't want to work at it. They don't want to take advice. They know it all because they go on the internet. When I grew up, there was no internet. There was no ESPN. There was 6 channels, I think, in New York, and 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. And whatever channel that is. And that's it. There was no internet, no cable, no ESPN, none of that. You watch the football game on Sunday, and I look back and I say, wow, I don't feel old like that. But, you learn. So you had to learn from somebody. Today, a lot of the young people, they're smart. Don't get me wrong. A lot of them are very brilliant. But a lot of them, that's where it's at. And, John, there's nothing, whether it's podcasting, whether it's YouTube, whether, I don't care what, in my cigar company, whatever. You learn from experience, period. You don't learn from a book or a video. You can get a good idea, but there's nothing about experience. I have a partner in the cigar, Sam, and we talk about that because he's 50s, in his 50s, and we look about that. We've come up through the streets, so that a lot to say for that.
Absolutely. I mean, when you understand different walks of life and different personalities, you realize everybody's got the same sensitivities, but they've experienced different things. And I think if you can learn that craft, that's very, very important.
Well,
you know what I mean?
John, I try to tell people what's the most important thing. 2 things I always say. Got to read. I mean, I'm an avid reader and comprehend, of course, reading comprehension. And you have to have people skills or communication skills to convey a message, to say why you read people. I mean, people often say, "Larry, you're a big guy. You fought a lot." And I was fighting as a kid, fought in the ring, did a lot of that stuff. And it wasn't the muscles or the bigness. I'm 245 pounds. Not any of that saved me in prison, because you get killed by the littlest guy. It's reading people, reading situations, finding out when something's going to happen. I mean, the littlest things of watching a piece of what people are wearing on their feet. When I used to walk into a prison, if I saw people walking around in flip-flops, I don't give a shit about this place. It's not going to be tough. You watch everybody walking around in their boots and sneakers, something's going to jump off. So you get to feel, you understand reading people is more important. It's like poker. The good poker players read people. Good guys from the streets read people. And you can't get that in a book. You can't get that in college. You can get that with life experiences and the places you grow up. Like you said, Jersey or something. When you're with the streets, there's no replacing that. People say, I grew up in the streets. Okay, that's survival. And you learn something.
There's a code, right? There's a code there that other people recognize.
100%.
I think other people recognize, like, if they see you and that other guy's the same thought process, they know it, and they're not going that route.
100%. I learned a lot from old timers. Now, a lot of people say, well, but they were criminals. Yes, they were criminals. Or a lot of people were doing nefarious things. But tell me what CEO might not be doing that. Tell me what, executive of a big corporation's not doing certain things. Tell me the government's not doing certain things. Obviously, I'm not promoting crime in any way, obviously, and when you look back at it, I didn't physically hurt anybody in a robbery, but I put fear in them, put guns in their faces. It was wrong. I mean, I never go on a show and ever say, oh, that was the way to go. It is what happened, and I have to tell the truth, but I'm not going to promote it and say it was the right way to go. I lost my kids. When I went to prison, John, my daughter was 15 months old, and I got out of prison, and she was 13. My son was 7, and I got out, and he was 18 years old. So I lost that. I can't blame anybody. Can't blame the government. I blame myself, and I paid for that dearly. And it's not about the money. And they took $6 million from me. So it's not about that. It's about what you lose with your family. I get out of prison. My dad, I'm very close with, he's got Alzheimer's since passed, but so you can't get those years back. You can't get the time back. In fact, I'm in Florida now and I take care of my mom. She's 90, she'll be 91. So I made the choice, no matter what, I will take care of my mother. And she took care of me. They didn't judge me. They knew my heart was good. They knew my soul was good. But I made stupid, crazy choices. There's no excuse why. I mean, grew up that way, yes, all that. But what I try to tell people who say that, I said, listen, it might be harder, but you have talents that kid who grows up in that rich family or that nice neighborhood doesn't have. You do know how to survive. Yes, there's no question. A kid who grows up with two doctors or whatever to a kid that grows up on the street, his mom's, crackhead, dad's in jail, totally different. But they both have different skills and anybody can make it. You talk to the president of the United States, whether it's Obama or Clinton or whoever, those guys, Bill Clinton's father was a drunk, used to beat him, goes to a road scholar. Obama grew up by his grandmother. So it can be done. And you just have to convey that to them and take no excuses, be responsible.
When you're around some of these characters, these mobsters and so forth, believe it or not, I tell you a funny story how small the world is my family built North Caldwell. My great uncle was Art Ruffalo. So Art Ruffalo and the Ruffalo brothers in 1951 brought the family from Newark. They built the first section in North Caldwell. Then they went up the hill in 1957 and built the second section in North Caldwell. So the people, our family was the Giniantacios, Ruffalos, Sopranos, all those.
Cavalcantis are in there, that area.
And it was a very, very interesting thing. My grandmother would tell stories, be like, hey, because Alex Remicchio, the main family was Remicchio, and Alex Remicchio raised all the Remicchio kids, and he ran the railroads in New York and New Jersey. And that was my grandmother's brother. And he was friends with Al Capone and all this. Al Capone came over to the house. My grandmother sat on his lap, brought Joe Louis over, all these things that we started hearing later. And, right across the street from my grandfather was Chuck LaPerry, Eddie LaPerry, which was LaPerry name was the Sicilian side of the family. But, when you're running around this environment, when it's family, it's not what you think it is. How do you see the difference from the family thought process of these guys running around to the business thought process of these guys running around? And what did that look like to you?
Well, when I grew up, obviously you didn't just join a family. You had to be accepted. You have to see you're smart. They had to do a lot of things like that with that kind of family. Now it does, you're growing up in the neighborhoods like I grew up in. It was mobsters, it was cops, it was sanitation people, it was everybody. So, the mobsters kids you, and before you know it, he's in there, and you're around the father's house all the time. They get to know your family. And before you know it, I was a hoodlum. I was a kid at 12 years old. I was running football tickets, booking tickets at 12, making $125 a year in the early 70s. $125 in a week, because I get a quarter for every ticket. So you take $500, I'm going knocking door to door, everybody, hey, you want a football ticket? And they bet him, and I would bring in about $500, which is $125 right off the top. And then I'm hoping they win because then you get a tip. But, so you hustle and you learn that. And we were a family before we even knew what families were. You know what I mean? Like the big family name, the Gambinos or the Columbos or the Lucchese's or any of them, Genovese Bananas. You become a family with the people you go. Matter of fact, I have a group of friends from the Bronx and Brooklyn that I go to lunch one Thursday every month. We'll go for lunch and we'll just bullshit and talk. We're still a family, I went to prison. I grew up with Michael Kay, who's a big New York writer, still is for the Yankees. I grew up with Doug Marrone, who was the coach for Jacksonville Jaguars, NFL player. Wayne Gurman made movies. I mean, we all grew up now it's funny. Now they talk about me and they go, hey, you're on that website. I go, what are you talking about? Lehman High School. I went to Lehman High School in the Bronx and I'm on the same website as Cardi B. She went to my school, Bobby Bonilla, the baseball player. And it's funny because we all done something. But we were all a little family. We helped each other. To this day, we help each other. And so that's our family. I consider that. Now, of course, you had your mob family you had to be associated with because you needed protection, and you had to make money. That's just the way it was. I hate to say good about it. I hope kids don't even think that's the way to go. Because it's not. I mean, they're dead or in jail, most people. And
why do you think these families, it was all about survival, and why do you think these families, because one of our cousins, his name was Joey Lip. and if you asked Joey the night before, whatever you need, he would have it at your doorstep the next day. It fell off the truck.
We never bought anything, John. I remember buying underwear. My father would buy underwear. And Joey Mackey, I remember his name. He'd come by in his Cadillac. The trunk would open. There's socks and underwear. And I don't think I've ever. I mean, we didn't go to stores. There was no Walmarts or any of that. So they had a 5 and dime store. You could go steal from it. But it was a different time. So, like I said, everything fell off a truck.
Yeah. Now, do you know Dan Bongino down there in Florida? He's from Long Island.
Where is he at?
He's in, I think he's in Fort Lauderdale or West Palm. And then some other friends of mine, Harry Oates, he does all of Trump's production down at Mar-a-Lago, and he's from Ronkonkoma.
Ronkonkoma, yeah.
Dan Bongino was Gary Milius, this boy who owns Oheka Castle in Long Island and Huntington. Do you know those guys?
I know the one name, but I don't know them. I think they're in Boca, to be honest.
Okay.
And so I think they are, because there's a bunch of people up in Boca from up north, and obviously South Florida is New York and Jersey. They call it the mini New York, mini Jersey, and it is. So you've seen a lot of guys, a lot of mobsters. We got at it. We either left Florida. Back in the day, man, you could just leave, and if they were investigating you for something, literally leave. Now forget it. Computers, interstate stuff, the RICO. The RICO was around, but they didn't use it. They only really used it for mob people, like the bosses. I got convicted under RICO. My conviction was for what they call Hobbs Act robbery, which is under the RICO Act. So they got me for a RICO. That's how the feds got my case. And what Hobbs Act means is interfering with interstate commerce. So you can actually rob a McDonald's, and you think, what's federal about that? Well, McDonald's buys its potatoes from Idaho. So once you interfere with interstate commerce, the federal government comes in and says, they can RICO you. They don't do it unless they want you. I was pretty big, and they weren't, I hate to say it, they weren't smart enough. The locals didn't have the resources and, the reach to really get me. And the feds do, though. Man, I did not know how many feds were on me until I got caught.
What do you think about Gotti when you were around him?
Well, first of all, John Gotti had a temper, man. That I'll never forget. I seen him throw a glass across a restaurant. Man, I felt so bad for a kid because he only put 2 beans in his coffee instead of 3 beans, which mean health, wealth, and happy. So when you take the 1 bean, it's like you tell him, "Go fuck yourself." Obviously, the kid didn't mean, you put in Sambuca the way they do. But no, I felt bad for the kid. Obviously, everybody knows. I mean, you can't be parading around like you got a license to do what he did. The downfall of him was that, obviously, but the old timers, the Carl Gambinos, those guys, like you're saying, you guys from the old 50s and 60s, they were quiet. They lived nice lives. They had zillions of dollars. They didn't live in mansions, but they lived very nicely. They always new Cadillacs or whatever. Caddies and Lincolns were the big thing when we were growing up. You didn't see all these crazy cars you see today. Now, what has happened, and you want to talk about the mob, the pretty much downfall. All the guys who were somebody back in my time, they come from nothing and they were hustlers. They knew how to make money. I was like that. Kids today, they grew up rich, and their fathers, the moms, they fucking rich, college, they got cars at 16, they get shit, and they don't know how to earn. They don't get the respect from people. And obviously the feds have dismantled a lot. But even besides that, there's still tough kids out there. Don't get me wrong. In fact, I think it's more dangerous now than it is back in my time because you had to do something to get killed. Today, these hotheads and, maybe they're
They don't value life.
The what?
They don't value life at all.
Absolutely, John. They don't value life. And when you look at that, you say to yourself, I mean, they want to just make a name for themselves, They don't even understand the long implications of the family or of the heat coming down on people. or them going to prison for life. You know, I mean, they're just morons. And that comes from not having that hustle mentality. You know, and listen, how can you be a boss? How can you be somebody and tell somebody how to do something when you don't even understand it? I mean, whether it's hijacking, whether it's rob. I mean, we did everything. I used to rob cars when I was 15, you know, and what license? Yeah. But, you know, in the Bronx. So, and Jersey, you talk about Jersey, we used to go down Elizabeth, you know.
Elizabeth, yeah.
And drop cars off and shit like that. Actually, cars were getting shipped overseas back then. You know, literally, we had a person in the motor vehicle. They would change the VIN numbers on the titles, make a legit car. They check the title. Boom, the car's in, you know, Saudi Arabia, the car's over Europe, something, you know. And there was a big profit to that. I mean, I told you, everything comes to an end, and at least crime. It does.
Did you ever hear a story? We had Henry Hill's Life Rights after Goodfellas.
Okay.
From the 80s, 82. And it's about when he was in witness protection. And they said, you know, when he got arrested, and I think at the time Gotti was a henchman. When he got arrested, you know, they wanted him for Lufthansa heist. But when he started talking, he indicted probably 40 or 50 capos that took a lot of the Italians out, where a henchman like Gotti was able to move up pretty quickly. Do you think there was any truth to that? Because they wanted him for the robbery, but then he started talking about all these other things where a lot of guys got in trouble. Is there any truth to that?
Well, you know, what I remember Lufthansa. I was about 17, I think it was. I mean, we knew kind of where it was and what happened. I mean, we all knew the airport. I mean, everybody brought out from the airport. Kennedy was a big money thing for everybody. But I have funny stories about that. But I had Michael Francis on my show, and we talked about that. And Henry really was a drug addict guy, you know. He was connected. He was kind of like, but he was like a fucking weasel, you know. They portrayed him a lot different than a lot of people knew of him that I know. I didn't know him, but I know of that whole crew. But that's when I was running around. I remember I was going to collect money from Nicky Barnes. Nicky Barnes was in Harlem at the time with heroin. And Nicky Barnes ended up flipping, obviously. He was the king of Harlem. Man, I remember being in a train once when the blackout, and I got off at 125th Street, Lexington Avenue, in the subway. It was a blackout, New York City blackout. You can look it up. I think 77. And boy, Harlem was a rough place, man. Obviously, that's where a lot of people went down to get drugs. Heroin was a hard drug down there. You know, of course, then you had the Westies. You know, I mean, I knew some of them. I knew Jimmy Coonan. Met him, you know, Roy DeMeo and that crew, and they had Harlem, they had the Westies a little bit. And that started fading off, too, you know, because a lot of people got busted. That's when, you know, the late 70s and is when, in 80s was when the feds or people started hitting the drugs hard, because there was a lot of overdoses. And obviously, you know, after Vietnam in 75 or whatever it was, they came back. Heroin was just huge. And I mean, I remember I was a kid, and I remember people overdosing all the time. And it was just, wow, it was crazy times.
Interesting. Well, when you look back at everything, would you do anything different?
You know, people ask me that. It's a great question, John. I have to say no, because I think the path we take, you become who you are because of the path you take. Good, bad, you know, or different. Of course, Bill Gates once said, would you do different if you had it? Of course you would. You're not going to make the mistakes you did, whatever they are. But to say, you know, the path it is, would I had the kids I had? Would I've had the education? I got my law degree. I got a lot of things now. I mean, it's hard to say. Of course, I wouldn't want to hurt people. I mean, I always say, and I never hurt anybody who wasn't in my business. If that makes sense. And I was a violent guy. I mean, I used to lay guys' arms on curbs, snap them. It was just a little crazy. I think I had a fucking screw loose. But you know, I never hurt a civilian, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
I never, you know, I wouldn't do that. I mean, I can't stand people pick on women. I can't stand any bully, you know, bully me. You might beat me, but you know what's going to happen. So, you know, don't, you know, bullies just bully people they can bully. Hit a woman. Listen, I don't hit women. I don't have to prove that this 245-pound guy can knock out a woman. I don't care. Yeah. I tell a woman also, John, don't put your hands on me, because then I'm going to treat you like a man, you know? And I never had that issue with my wives. Very good relationships with my ex-wife. I mean, I lost them because of the life I lived and the prison time I had to go. So, and that's just the way life was. So I don't think I would do things. I mean, what am I going to say? Oh, yeah, I'd love to be a doctor. I'd like to be a fucking great surgeon or some shit. But it's not to me. I talk with my hands too much. I'm looking at you. That's typical New York.
Now your where's your mom and dad from? And
My mom
what
and
was your
dad from New
childhood
York.
like?
My mom actually from Canada. She actually went through school all the way to high school in Canada in St. Laurent, Montreal. And my dad from New York City, no
That's
Italian
Irish?
background, so I couldn't have been a made man or anything. But
You
listen,
said, what did you say, Irish?
German, Irish, Bulgarian, my dad, my mom's French Canadian, and
Gotcha.
100% that. And I did ancestry, and that's what I was. And I found out some crazy shit in that ancestry. My relatives came from Canada, that side of them, and they went to New Hampshire, and one of them owned a jewelry store. So that's funny. And I was robbing jewelry stores. One of them way back was a murderer that killed her 2 or 3 husbands, and they keyholed her. Keyhole, keyholing?
Mm-mm.
When they take rope and they put you like this and they drag you under a boat with the barnacles and kill you that way. Yeah, it's crazy. What? I mean, you read some of the stuff and pretty wild.
Well, the reason I get into that, do you think you carried? I'm a clairsentient and I read people. Do you think you carry some darkness with you from your childhood, or was some stuff carried over that kind of made you had a little anger that you kind of helped with what you're doing?
John, there's no question. I didn't know it until I got older. Actually, when I wrote the book, it was the hardest thing in my book. I was abused as 11 years old in the Catholic Church, and listen, I'm not religious at all, but I don't hate like every person that be a Catholic. I don't go to church. I remember when it happened. Remember everything. Matter of fact, my co-writer Peter Goldenbach, who was a 7-time bestseller. A couple of psychologists used to say, well, that's when you really went off the rails. You're 12 years old, you were running the streets, you had a lot of violence, a lot of anger, like you said, violence and stuff. Now, do I blame that? No, I don't look at it like, oh, I'm going to hate everybody in the world. Down deep, I'm sure I did. And I'm sure I acted out to be a man or to be, whatever happens. But I don't look at it now. I mean, definitely not now. I mean, I always accept the responsibility. But I remember I started getting crazy. I got kicked out of Catholic school. Fighting in the streets, robbing and stealing up down the avenue and a lot of things. So I think my violent streaks probably come on me. Listen, we all fought in the streets though, John. I mean, that was something we did. You know that if you're from up Jersey area, people fight quickly,
Yeah.
it was fight. But it was a little better too. We didn't shoot people because you lost. You fought. Yeah, I remember chains. I remember certain other shit. But it wasn't like it is, today. I mean, every kid will have a gun and just pull it out and shoot you,
Yeah.
because they're scared. That's the problem with law enforcement, John. Law enforcement, when I grew up, cops would fucking take their belt off, put it in a car and fight you. We had respect. Today, I think a lot of cops are scared. I teach the police academy. I'm an honorary police officer in St. Louis. And I taught the police academy. I asked the people, the whole class, I don't know, 40 people. I said, how many of you been in a fight? Did you know less than 0.5% of that whole class has ever been in a fight? So how can you not be in a fight and be a cop? They're scared. And what do they do when they're scared? They're taught how to use a gun. They're taught how to use this. And, before you know it, listen, I don't care who you are as a cop. You pull out a gun, there's only two choices. Shoot the person or get it taken away from you. Because if you pull out a gun, there's one hand that's dead. You can't fight. You can't do anything. It should be the last resort. I mean, the last resort. But no, you'll see it all the time. And I really believe that has a lot to do with them not being street guys, street smart. When I grew up, they used to cops to beat our ass. And, but they were also different, maybe less social media, less cameras. I mean, I remember driving my car at 17 years old and cops drinking, stops me, knows who you are in the neighborhood, fucking puts you in the car, brings you to your mother, gives her the keys, says, Miss Lawton, if I see him out tonight, I'll put him in jail. His car is over here. Here's the keys.
Yeah.
And then you look back now, you can never get a break like that,
Yeah.
And I just think cops should be parts of communities. And I mean, literally part of the community. And I think a big problem with law enforcement, I talk about this on a lot of shows, is they're holding these kids to too high of a degree, meaning this. Oh, he got arrested for pot. He can't be a cop. Are you fucking kidding me? I want that guy. How about a kid who got arrested because he's in the apartment and his mother and father would have whatever, and he gets arrested for being in there and now he's got a minor wreck. They really should take those kids. Those would be the best cops in the world if they ever apply. Because they're going to take care of serious shit. And listen, I support.
I call that the country club syndrome. You know why?
Go ahead.
Well, one thing I realized about rich people, especially up north, is if you've been rich for 20, 30 years, you go to the city, you come back, you go to the country club. You do that for 30 years. Every time you walk into the country club, they praise you. You're the best thing since sliced bread. And then even though they're very, very rich, they're very naive to society and they don't know the real world.
So true.
You know?
True. That is so true. And you get these kids who apply for police officers, and they're the ones I used to take their lunch money, and now they got a badge, they got a gun, and their bravado, and they take it out. Really, there's a hiring problem, I think, with police. And obviously there's reasons for that. One of them is, let's face it, they don't pay them enough. They don't pay these guys. They can't raise a family. Who wouldn't see drug money in a trunk, and you make such little money, you can't even, you're trying to do whatever. I don't even blame them. I hate to say that. Fuck.
Yeah.
Listen, pay them a decent salary. Pay teachers salaries that matter. And then you'd have better applicants. You'd have people who want the job. And listen, it's an honorable profession. And I tell people, listen, as much as I'll rail certain cops and do everything, good cops are good cops. And you know what? If your house is called, if your house is robbed, John, what do? You call 411 or 911? Call 911, 411. A lot of people don't even know what 411 is today, The young kids. I ask them, what 411 is? What's that? So that's information. You call the phone. They go, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, Larry, where can we find the book?
Just Google on any of my videos, in the description, there's a link to the book. It's all over the place. It's on internet. We sell. Don't get hooked in. I really like to tell people, I sell that book. It's because we're putting new chapters. It'd be $23 or $24. Don't go. You'll see my book online for $200, $100. And people got them resell because I didn't print for a while. And don't get hooked in that. So either go to one of my website, it's the Reality Check program. They can get it there. Or again, any one of my videos, clicks it goes right to the day and the book goes out.
And the title, give us the title of the book so everybody knows.
It's Gangster Redemption. The name is Gangster Redemption. Matter of fact, it's a good one.
Cool.
And the book actually says how America's most notorious jewel robber got rich, got caught, and got his life back on track. And I often tell that, John, because I got out of prison, John, penniless, didn't know what I was going to do at 46. People can change. Don't ever think. I was on a board with the federal government, and I was at a meeting, and I had one cop say, ask some of the kids you got to give up on. Man, I got mad. I slammed my phone on the desk, got up. So what are you talking about? Look at my record, and I'm here sitting with you guys. Mm-hmm. Don't give up on these kids. I can't stand that. I don't care what the kid did. You don't know his situation. Give these kids, America was built on second chances, third chance, whatever it takes. But don't give up. And if I can change and work hard, and I still work, I love working. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And it kind of pisses you off with that, especially when I get young people. They go, oh, I'm 30. I can't do it. Are you kidding me? Get off your ass. Mm-hmm. I don't know how old you are. When you're 20, you think you know it all. When you hit 30, you look back, man, I was pretty stupid at 20. When you hit 40, you look back, man, I didn't know shit at 30. When you hit 50, you say, damn, am I ever going to learn anything? And then when you hit 60 now, you go, freak, I'm still learning all the time. The minute you stop learning, you're done.
Well, I think there's a lot of bad choices. Just because you make a bad choice doesn't make you a bad person. And I think there's more people out there like that are labeled that inhibits them from moving forward. And I think that labeling needs to be considered, because I think you can look at people and find that guy where there's the ones that make one or two bad choices. Then there's ones that you just know he's not crossing back over. They are that personality that you can recognize, and those are the ones that don't cross back over, and they're going to stay on that side. Because if you don't cross back over at a certain age, you stay on that side.
John, that's so true. I often talk about, I was in Atlanta Penitentiary. We had 2,000 inmates. 880 had life. Out of that 880, 200 fight their case leave. 400 who have life, they get a lover, they live their life, whatever crazy shit. There's other 200 are total psychopaths. And I never want to see those guys out of prison, because they're going to kill somebody. They don't give, they got some really, really fucked up shit. So I agree with you with that, but people change, and people have to know that they change.
Well, we'll bring this thing in to a close here, and I appreciate you coming on the show, Larry. It's been a great conversation. Hopefully whoever's listening out there can learn something from this conversation and apply that to their life. And yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on the show. This has been Mr. Larry Lawton, and I am John Edmonds Cosma, the CEO of Bang Productions.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate your time, and keep up the good work.